5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. Strap in. You're about to listen to the hottest sounds, and you've got it.
You're listening to Eclectic Musings with Sasha Cooper on audioburger.com, the Richard Gladman Interview special. We're going to kick off with a little bit of Kate Bush and Rubber Band Girl.
Bouncing back to life, a rubber band band.
Well, good evening. You're listening to Eclectic Musings on audioburger.com with me, Sasha Cooper. Now, tonight's guest, we have a very special treat for you because this man, all I could say is he is an absolute inspiration. So we had to get him on the show. His name is Richard Gladman, and he's also a wonderful organizer for Frighten Brighton, and he's also one of the founders for the Classic Horror campaign. Welcome to the studio, Richard.
Thanks, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right, now, Richard, let's start right back at the beginning so we can get a little bit of a feel for the sort of person that you are before we move on to anything else. So, what has your journey been? First, tell me, where did you grow up and how did you get into horror films?
Okay, I was born in London, but actually grew up in Milton Keynes.
Mm.
Before it was a big city. It was turning into a city. A very dull place culturally, no culture at all. But I think I got into horror originally, weirdly enough, through Disney films. The first movies I ever went to see were Walt Disney cartoons, and I was always more intrigued by the villains and the horror stuff, like the witch in Snow White.
Ah, now we're talking. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
Sleeping Beauty, they
Yeah.
had a witch character who turned into a dragon.
Maleficent.
Thank you, that's it. And she looked fabulous in a big hat. So all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, television, it was Doctor Who, was very scary as a child with the Daleks and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then eventually the horror double bills that used to be on BBC Two. Late Saturday nights, as a family, we would watch the old black and white films, and eventually I would stay up and watch the more naughty colour Hammer films.
Oh, now hang on. When we say naughty, are we talking very near the bone here?
We're talking boobs and blood.
Boobs and blood. I like it. No, seriously though, what makes you think? What makes the whole thing with horror so appealing? Do you think?
I think for me it's because it's a genre that actually encompasses a whole lot more than just horror. It's probably the most varied genre because you can get horror comedies, you can get horror that's science fiction based, you can get like classic films, all different types, political. There's so many horror films, especially nowadays, are made with like a social and political subtext. Look at all the zombie films.
Ah, yes, of course.
George Romero started all that off in the 60s with his kind of, I think it was his take on the Vietnam War. So the newspapers and magazines say, although he's since denied that. And then Dawn of the Dead was his take on consumerism, etc., etc.
Excellent. Now, you say it's a very social commentary on how things are. I mean, do you think then that life is a little bit more bleak than it's actually letting on?
Well, I think we can all look at, isn't it the budget today or tomorrow or something? I think life is very bleak for a lot of people. But horror, as well as being a political thing and social commentary, it's an escapism. And especially a lot of the old films, it's fun.
Yeah. Now, when we say fun, I mean, we're going right back as far as the 20s, aren't we?
Even further if you like, but yeah, 20s is a good place to start.
Excellent. And so, I mean, if we kick off a little bit with the whole thing with the 20s, I mean, what are your favourite films from that era?
From the 20s, for me, a lot of that stuff I didn't really get to see. But Nosferatu, because it's an absolute classic, 1922. It was an illegal version of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, now hang on. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty. Illegal. Expand.
Well, they didn't get the rights to the book. It was made in Germany, I think, and they filmed it anyway, just changed a few character names. But basically, it was Dracula. And so whoever owned the rights to Dracula at the time, whether it's the family or studio, what have you, they sued. They won the lawsuit, and Nosferatu was supposed to have been taken away and destroyed, every copy. But of course, copies escaped.
Uh-huh.
And now it's in the public domain, and it's classed as a classic, so it's a good job it wasn't destroyed.
Now, I've got to ask about Nosferatu because, in terms of the book, Nosferatu was actually there long before Dracula, I believe. Is that so?
You might know more about that than me, to be honest with you. I don't know.
Well, but this is the thing. This is just coming from the book's perspective, but apparently Dracula was actually based on Nosferatu as a springing point, and this is what a lot of people don't know.
Well, that's interesting because then it makes you could think that the people who made Nosferatu could have turned around and countersued the people who made Dracula, I guess.
That's true. I mean, could it be possibly of that they then deliberately taking it from a film that's been floating around in the ether or something?
Who knows? Who knows? I think it's even before even my time. I may be old, but I'm not that old.
I was going to say you're not old. Right, hang on a minute. I should make it clear here. He's sitting here on my bed, looking rather gorgeous. Would you mind me asking how old you are?
Oh, you'll never know.
You'll never.
No, no one
Oh,
knows such things. I bathe
oh.
in virgin's blood.
Oh, here we go. Countess Bathory strikes again.
Mhm.
Actually, talking of Countess Bathory, it brings me on to the whole thing with vampires as a whole. Now, vampires, I mean, a lot of people, when they talk about the whole genre of vampires, they don't automatically associate that with horror. They think it's a completely different thing altogether. Would you say what that was the case, or is it part of horror? Set the record straight for us, please.
Well, vampires, yeah, it's a big part of the horror genre, but I do know there's a lot of the goth crowd who aren't necessarily into the horror films as such, but they have their own subculture. There's also a whole subculture of people who are into vampirism itself, totally away from all the fiction, away from the movies, away from the classic horror films. They, I think some of them actually believe that vampires exist,
Mm.
and if not, they just like to follow that kind of cliched vampire path. I mean, some of them apparently do drink blood and indulge in various rituals, etc. But I don't know. I think vampires and vampirism has a big appeal to a lot of people.
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, and okay, it's a slightly different thing altogether. But whilst we're on the subject, I mean, this is the whole interesting thing. I have to admit with the whole vampirism aspect, because you're right. There are a few people who do believe that they are vampires, and don't try this at home, folks. I would say that now, but I mean, it is the whole thing with characters changing over the years. They keep changing over time. They change over centuries. How much of the gothic genre has changed so much?
Well, again, see, I'm not a goth. My interest is more horror films.
That's what I mean. The horror.
But yeah, okay, with the horror, vampire characters, have they changed? Yeah, I guess now there's a huge teenage fan base.
Mm.
True horror fans, of course, would slaughter me at mentioning the Twilight trilogy or however many films there were.
Sparkle.
Yeah, don't even go there. I wouldn't watch those sort of films. But it's just another way that the genre has evolved. I guess you had Buffy years ago, which appealed to the teenagers and a different audience. Again, horror films are always evolving anyway.
Indeed. And of course, it's not just vampires involved. I mean, we've got werewolves, we've got zombies, as aforementioned. What else could we expect from a horror genre? If, say, there are people out there who are completely new to it, and you were to sum it up in 5 words. Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, you have, haven't you? Well, I suppose if we're going to mention horror characters,
Mhm.
fortunately, you've just mentioned most of them.
Yeah.
Vampires, zombies, werewolves, mummies, and ghosts.
Hmm.
They're the ones that spring to mind.
Fantastic. And how much of an experimental sort of thing is it when you watch a film?
How do you mean by experimental?
Well, you mean certainly if we look back at the 20s, you had a lot of psychological horror. And then as you go further and further into the 50s, the 60s, it becomes a lot more in your face.
Mm.
That's what I mean by that.
Okay, again, I suppose it's about the genre changing. I mean, the whole movie industry had to change with the times. I think maybe people had become a bit used to certain tropes in the horror films, certain aspects of horror films were a bit familiar. Hammer Films, a British company, I might like to add, changed the face of horror in the 50s, took it away from the sort of more cheesy black and white stuff. Horror in America was going through a more sort of science fiction based phase, all the nuclear giant monsters, that kind of thing. And Hammer took it back to basics in one sense by remaking the old Universal films, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, but then they also changed it by adding sex and violence, a lot of blood, but it was by making the films more sexual, and that's when the genre changed. Then of course it carried on and on. You've got into the 80s, I guess. Yeah. Things became even more visceral, a lot more special effects. And I guess the video nasty stuff, where people were always pushing the envelope.
When you say a video nasty, what do you mean by that?
Well, in the 80s, in the UK in particular, films started being released on videotape, VHS, Betamax, what have you. People were able to watch films at home, not just go to the cinema. They had a whole choice of low-budget horror films to choose from, but the whole industry was not regulated, and so certain narrow-minded people saw some of the films and because they were pretty graphic, decided straight away that they were corrupting the nation's youth and corrupting the nation as a whole, and decided to use horror films as a scapegoat for what was wrong in society. I mean, it's a typical sort of Tory type thing, isn't it? It's like you pick on a subgenre, something that's interesting, pick on the arts in particular, use them as a scapegoat for all their policies going wrong.
So in one way, it's used as a form of exploitation, are you saying?
Well, I think horror films, even though they are exploitation themselves, were certainly exploited by the governments at the time and still are.
And there's been a lot of controversy surrounding this particular genre over time. What would you think has been the most controversial film you've come across in your entire life so far?
Oh my God, I don't know, because you've got to put it into context. Each era has its own controversial film, I guess. Recent ones, I'll say recent ones that spring to mind. I Spit on Your Grave in 1978 was definitely classed as a video nasty. It was banned in the UK and in various countries. It was a rape revenge drama. A lot of women's groups kind of criticized the film, but the film was actually made under the title Day of the Woman, and a lot of critics, myself included, watched the film. It's really harrowing. It's a horrible film, but see it almost as a feminist horror film.
Right, I see. Now again, we've got a very interesting thing coming up again, because you get to see the complete shift of the woman during the horror genres. And okay, we see it in a lot of films, but what is it about the horror genre that makes women that little bit more independent?
I think because they're battling against the most hideous demons or monsters or psychopaths or what have you. I mean, women back in the 20s, 30s, 40s were always portrayed as the victims. But then through the 50s and 60s, I think Hammer had a lot of strong female characters, a lot of female villains and monsters as well. And then in the 80s, with all the stalk and slash films, you've got your Halloween, your Friday the 13th. Then the final girl was invented. It's like a term that's used because there's always a survivor. It's usually the virginal one, the one who hasn't had sex or who doesn't smoke drugs or what have you, and she's usually the surviving one. So you started seeing the women characters fighting back against the villains. And then you've got Alien, so you've got Sigourney Weaver, who is a real kick-ass kind of role model for anyone, I would have thought.
And of course, I mean, just the graphics in that particular movie as well. I mean, if you haven't seen Alien, particular bursting out of the stomach. It's the one that has the alien bursting out of the stomach. I don't think anybody will forget that in a hurry.
No, definitely not. It's a real highlight. But yeah, so women have come a long way, and there's a whole thing. I mean, every year now I celebrate the Women in Horror Recognition Month, which is something that was started up on various sort of blogs, horror blogs, a lot of different groups, including women's groups and independent film. A lot of people have started not jumping on the bandwagon because it's a good thing, but celebrating what women do within the genre now. It's not just about actresses and scream queens and people playing victims. It's about the women behind the cameras, the script writers, the producers, the directors, people like Emily Booth, who started as, I guess, a scream queen, bit exploitative,
Yep.
very attractive woman. So she's playing these characters in films, but she's now, she's a journalist, she's a horror host, she's the face of the horror channel. She presents films every single day. She's had her own column in various magazines. She's a powerful woman in British horror.
Well, indeed, and you've been very lucky, haven't you, in getting to meet all these amazing people along the way. And we do tend to forget the people behind the scenes. I mean, really, they are the crux to making these particular films a success, aren't they?
Definitely. I mean, you're always going to get a different take. If you're going to have horror films just from a male perspective and a hetero male perspective, you're going to get one take. Then you can get the female perspective, and then you can get queer horror as well. So you get the gay perspective or the lesbian perspective. There's all different aspects. Horror is a genre that encompasses everything.
Well, indeed. And again, I've got to come back onto your writing briefly, because you're a little bit of a journalist yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess so. I write for... God, who do I write for at the moment? I write a classic horror column for Shock Horror magazine. They're based in Northampton, so they're British. They've been brilliant because they've been very supportive of me over the last couple of years and the classic horror campaign. So they sponsor film events, and they give away free copies of their magazine. They help to promote the event, and now they asked if I would do a classic horror column, so that the magazine's more balanced.
Yeah.
So they deal with the new stuff and different aspects of the horror genre, like tattoos and scream queens and all that sort of thing. And now they do classic horror through me. So they're one example. I've just started a column for Haunted After Dark, which is a spin-off of Haunted magazine, which is it's an online magazine.
Fantastic.
So it's like a classic horror. Again, it's classic horror. That's kind of what I've become known for, I guess. And they've asked me to do a classic horror diary. So really it's just kind of letting people know different events, things that are coming up, things, maybe new films that hark back to the old films, or if there's any particular screenings of old films that are coming up in the UK, I guess, or if any classic horror film stars are doing any signings anywhere, appearing at any events. So I just kind of have to keep my finger on the pulse and let people know what's going on.
Fantastic. And we're going to get more onto that in the next section. So without any further ado, we're going to kick off, because we love independent music. We love very much supporting independent artists and unsigned artists. I've been sent in this track from a lovely Brighton boy called Lewis Corbett, who has done a very unusual version of The Summer of '69. And so, Lewis, thank you very much for sending that in, and I hope you enjoyed this version, and we'll be right back with some more on the Frighten Brighton campaign.
Summer of '69, take 5. I got my real first 6 dream, brought in at the 5 and dime, played it till my fingers bled. Was the summer of '69, me and some guys from school, yeah, had a band, we tried real hard. Jimmy quit and Jody got married. Never know, we'd never get far. But when I look back now, those summers seem to last forever. And if I had the choice, I wanna be there. Those were the best days of my life. Ain't no use complaining when you've I've got the job to do. Spend my evenings down at the drive-in, and that's where I met you. Standing on your mama's porch, you told me that you wait forever. When I held your hand, you knew that it was now or never. Those were the best days of my life. Back in the summer of '69. Man, we were killing time. We were young and reckless. We needed to unwind. I guess nothing lasts forever. Forever. Yeah. Now that the chimes are changing, I look at everything that's come and gone. Sometimes when I play my old six string, I think about what's went wrong. Standing on your mama's porch, you told me that it lasts forever. And when I held her hand, I knew that it was now or never. Those were the best days of my life. Back in the summer of '69.
Sit down, my dear, and have a cup of tea. This might come as a shock. It did to me. This is not a joke. She's gone up in smoke and out eternally. Sit down, my dear, and have a cup of tea. Right or wrong, I guess we'll never know. There was no way she really had to go. This is not a joke. She's gone up in smoke and out eternally. Sit down, my dear, and have a cup of tea.
audio shows on audioburger.com.
Oh, yes, and we're back. And if you just joined us, we are speaking to the wonderful Richard Gladman from the classic horror campaign and Frighten Brighton. Now, we've actually had a little bit of a message from one of our listeners, Steve Armitage, who is one of our regular presenters, getting back a little bit to the whole alien thing. It seems, according to Steve, Ridley never told the actors, aside from John Hurt, what was going to happen in that scene. So, can we clarify this, Richard?
Yeah, he's completely correct. So all the reactions you see in that scene where the alien bursts out of John Hurt's chest, everyone's splattered and sprayed with blood. Every reaction was genuine. They were just so shocked that they just did not expect that to happen, and it really messed with their minds.
Fantastic. And of course, we're going to mess with people's minds even more as we go further into the show, because we have a little bit of an opportunity for the listeners out there to ask Richard any question you like. So, if so, whether you're in the chat room, I should say a quick hello to the chat room quickly. Of course, Silk we've got in the chat room, Steve Armitage. We've got Mary and Snuggyheads, Bunker Bunny, Waddle Darling, and Bubble Boo in the chat room. If you, I know these sound really bizarre
They're
names,
great
Richard.
names. They're cool names. I love them.
They are. But if you don't like them and you want to change them, just click on the green man and just put the name that you'd prefer to be recognised in as well. But if you want to ask Richard any questions, if you go to the top of the Audio Burger site and look for my name, click email me, and I will make sure your question gets read out on air, putting him even more on the spot than he already is. Squirming. Are you squirming?
I am a bit, yeah.
This is kind of like a turning on its head for you, because you like making people squirm, but now you're squirming.
I know. It's karma. It's all coming back to kick me in the ass.
Oh, yes, it is. Although, we've got to mention, actually, the last couple of tracks that were played. The first track that was played, of course, was Lewis Corbett with the Summer of '69. If you want to find out more about his music, you can go to the Facebook page, which is obviously www.facebook.com/Lewis Corbett solo artist. That's Lewis and all one word, Corbett, Corbett, solo artist. And of course, the last track that you heard, now this is very appropriate actually for going into the classic horror campaign, because Eileen Daly, that may be familiar to some people, because she's not only the lead singer of the Courtesans, whom you heard just then with Burnout. To find out more about them, go to www.thecourtesans.net. And, well, actually, she is very, very appropriate for this genre, isn't she? Because she was one of the stars that you've come across on the horror scene, isn't she?
Oh, God, definitely. Eileen is brilliant. She's got a huge cult following. Mainly, there's one film in particular. She's made loads and loads of horror films over the years. She's still making horror films now, but she's particularly known for a British film called Razorblade Smile, where she played Lilith Silver, who is a vampire, who is kind of going through the centuries battling against another vampire. I won't say any more in case you guys go and get the film. It's probably on Love Films. You can still get it everywhere, and it's called Razorblade Smile. She is awesome in this. She's also on Loaded TV now. She's in a new sitcom called, I think it's Sex, but SEXXX.
Yes, I think it is actually. It's quite good actually.
Okay, and she's also on a panel show as well. But the reason I'm particularly fond of her, apart from I enjoy the films she makes, is because she's supported the classic horror campaign right from the beginning, and even turned up to a couple of the events that I've done in London, just the double bill screenings that I host, where I show a couple of old classic horror films, and she just came along with some friends a couple of times. it was just really nice to see her. So we've met up a few times since. She's a very, very nice lady.
Fantastic. And hello to Eileen if you are listening out there. And I did play that track, or should I say Sassy Goth played that track on the last Night Owl. But actually, whilst we're on this wonderful springboard, you are quite a huge renowned figure for this next section I'm going to be talking about. I'm talking about, of course, the Classic Horror Campaign. Now, tell us a little bit about how that came about and how it's progressed since that time.
Okay, the Classic Horror Campaign, it's just something that I started up just a couple of years or so ago. And the idea was just to start a petition to get the BBC to start showing classic old horror films back on TV. Years ago in the 70s and 80s, and then later on as well in the 90s, they always used to show in the summer months an old black and white film on a Saturday night, followed by what was then a slightly more modern colour movie from the 60s or 70s. And a lot of people, lots of people in the industry now, I mean, even people like Mark Gatiss, famous writer, actor, etc., who was completely influenced by these horror double bills. There's a whole kind of subgenre of fans in this country who grew up watching these, some people might say, silly old films, classic old films, cult films, whatever you want to call them. And a few years ago, I was kind of flicking through all the different channels that we get these days with our cable and satellite, but just looking for anything old, really. any movie that was older than, say, 10 years. I'm not a great fan of most modern films. I think most of them are rubbish. There was just nothing. There was nothing on. I couldn't find anything culty, anything interesting, anything different at all. And I just got a bee in my bonnet, really. And I thought, come on, why do they not bring back the old classic horror double bills?
Yeah, so hence the Classic Horror Campaign kicked off.
Which it kicked off with just a petition, which now has about 3,000 signatures.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're trying to get more, of course. But then it became a blog, which became a website, which turned into doing film screenings, mainly in London. And then I guess in some ways it culminated last year with the Frightened Brighton Classic Horror Film Festival. We did an all day, 5 horror films at the Comedia, sold out. People were being turned away at the door on the actual day.
So there really is a huge call for this kind of thing.
Yeah, there is. And the great thing is as well, because even if the BBC don't bring back these films in that kind of format, I think what it's proved is that there is a big market out there for classic horror. But it's also, what I'd like to do is kind of introduce these old films to a younger audience, so that kids can understand that there were films before CGI, that horror isn't Twilight or Supernatural or Buffy. There's more to it. If there weren't films made in the 20s, 30s, etc., you wouldn't have what you have now. So it's a kind of like a film education thing. It's raising awareness, isn't it, of old films?
Indeed. I mean, why do you think the BBC are not showing these kind of films?
Your guess is as good as mine. I really, really wouldn't have a clue. I do not know. I mean, no.
I mean, it's pretty frustrating, really, simply because you've got these wonderful films, and all they're showing generally, and let's face it, they show a lot of shit on TV. I hell a lot of the time, don't they?
That's actually very blunt, but yeah, you're completely correct. They do show a lot of shit, a lot of modern stuff. Not all of it is shit, of course. A lot of reality TV, but I think part of what the BBC should be doing is protecting our cultural heritage. Old films are important. They should be showing not just horror, but any genre. They should be showing lots of old films, black and white films. Why not? What's wrong with them?
Well, indeed. I mean, do you think in one way the BBC have got carried away with what the youth culture of today wants, rather than what used to be recognised as such a fantastic classic, say back in the 1950s, when you had people like Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. You got all those wonderful glamour people, and then all of a sudden you see, well, awfulness, really, don't you?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I know that I do understand that times change, but I think there's room for every kind of genre, every sort of you can have old films and new films. I just don't understand why they're not showing stuff that is older. It doesn't make sense. You know, as a channel, they've got 4 major television networks at their disposal now. You know, BBC4 is supposed to be like a cultural channel. They should be showing old stuff, not just old movies, but old TV shows. You know, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and it shouldn't be forgotten.
Well, no, but then again, wouldn't you say though that places like Sky Movies and Challenge TV are doing all this kind of thing? If people haven't got that Sky thing though,
Well,
what
you know
what
what?
else should we be what else should we be doing about
Well,
it?
exactly. I mean, we pay for the BBC because we have to, and that's fair enough. I've got no qualms against paying a TV license. I think it is worth the money. But, you know, a lot of people can't afford satellite TV, um, Sky Movies. Who really wants to support the corrupt Murdoch family? Not me, that's for sure. The one channel that is kind of holding the torch or carrying the torch for classic horror now is the Horror Channel, which we mentioned earlier, which Emily Booth is the hostess with the mostess. She introduces a lot of old movies now. They're showing a lot of stuff, even from the 60s, 70s, 80s. It's great. I mean, they are doing a really good job of showing old movies. But even so, they're still a niche channel. You know, it should be out there for everyone to have the opportunity, and that's what the BBC's for.
And so, in one way, then, wouldn't it be a good idea maybe to get the BBC and the Horror Channel to team up and do a kind of collaboration where that's concerned?
Um, it would be lovely, wouldn't it? But logistically, it wouldn't work because the Horror Channel is a commercial station. BBC's
Oh.
public funded. That's never going to happen.
Well, it's such a shame because, quite frankly, you've got all this wonderful talent going on there, and then it's just going by the wayside.
It is indeed. But sort of going back to the Brighton
Yeah.
thing, and you were mentioning, or we both sort of mentioned about younger people watching these films. One thing I was really pleased about at Fright Brighton was the amount of young people. I mean, people who were in their early 20s who had come to see these old films, and I had some brilliant comments. There was one guy, he came up to me. He's probably about 20. And he was like, really want to thank you for introducing me to these old films. He said, I've never seen a horror film that was made before 1980, ever. And he said, and a lot of people said, that his favourite movie that we screened was Mad Love, which is 1935.
That's a brilliant movie. I think that was when I met you, actually,
Yeah.
because of that screening.
It was. You know, met a lot of good contacts on that day. And so many people said that was their favourite film, and they didn't think it would be. They just presumed because, oh God, you know, it's really old. And they said it blew their minds. They thought it was a really good film.
Yeah, for those who don't know what Mad Love is, what is it about?
Well, it's a Peter Lorre starring film. It's basically a kind of a psycho love story, and the guy gets his hands cut off and replaced with I think it's a killer's
That's right.
hands, which kind of possess him, so he becomes a killer. He's originally a pianist,
Yeah.
but there is another version, The Hands of Orlak. So there's like different variations on that film.
Of course, yeah, Orlak. That's quite a significant film again.
Yeah, it is. It's the same story. And Peter Lorre was also in The Beast with Five Fingers,
Yeah.
which some of the older listeners would remember screening on the old BBC Two horror double bills, an old black and white, and it had a crawling hand. I think it kept playing the piano or something.
Now we know where the Addams Family got the thing
Yeah, totally.
from.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, but it is the thing, though, going back to this whole thing, and we'll go on to the Frightened Brighton thing in a second, but it is that whole thing. If we didn't have these classic horror films, most of the stuff that we see today would not be around because of them, would they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of the things that we had Emily Booth again hosting Frightened Brighton with us, and it was myself and Scare Sarah. She was the other co-host, And we spoke about stuff like that on stage, kind of with the audience. And one of the things you've always got to remember, it's like the old films were the sort of template for what's come since. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't have the modern films today. But it's the same with anything, any part of culture. If we didn't have the old classic literature, we wouldn't have the modern books that people read now.
Well, indeed. And so what can people do to get on board with this classic horror campaign?
Good question. Okay. First of all, most important is just sign our petition. I do have the link. It's a bit of a long link, so probably the best and easiest way to do it is go to the Classic Horror Campaign website. So it's www.classichorrorcampaign, that's all one word, .com. And as soon as you go on the page, on the right hand side, it says sign the petition. Click on that, it will take you straight through to it. So just sign it, leave a message, forward the petition to your friends and family. Just get as many people to sign it as you can.
And will we be able to get it sent to the BBC and hopefully make them listen?
Yeah, we can. There's all kinds of things that we could attempt. We've so close to the 3,000 mark that I think once we hit that, I don't know, it's like a milestone, and maybe then we can try and approach them. Maybe do a zombie walk or a what are they called? A splash mob?
Flash mobs. Splash mob? That would be a very different thing.
Yeah, something like that. Get people in costume, and we can kind of present a physical version of the petition, and of course we can email it to them as well.
That's brilliant. Now we're going to get on to the whole Frighten Brighton bit in a minute, and another campaign which we're both going to be launching as well, keeping in with the musical theatre theme. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a break. And I've just seen in the chat room somebody called Mr. Secret. Hello to you, Mr. Secret, from Richie, Dave Porter, and The Secret. Actually, he's the drummer and the producer. We've been literally having a chat all day between Dave and Mr. Secret, and we've been very lucky to actually have this guy approach us because Richie Dave Porter, he's a fantastic guitarist, rock singer, and very experimental kind of person. He's just amazing, and he is actually a pagan as well, just to throw that one in. And he's been literally pestering Eclectic Musings in a good way, saying, check out my music. And so we did today, and all I can say is, it fucking rocks. It fucking rocks. And it's about time we had something like this going, quite frankly. We've been sent a couple of tracks, and we're going to play one of them tonight. This is called Rock Chick, and it's by Richie Dave Porter and The Secret. And it's incredible. We're definitely going to get Richie Dave Porter on the show for season 3, so watch this space. In the meantime, enjoy Rock Chick.
Bad girl with a cold heart of steel. Bad girl, you don't have feelings that are real. Rock chick, baby, you were heaven sent. You made me smile when you got up and went. I hold silver singing cowboy songs. You don't do right, you do everything wrong. Sexy little mama with a short red dress. You tease the guys who made our heads a mess. You look so hot, but your heart was cold. We're all just toys, you look good when you roll.
better watch out for his big bad bite. Hey there, little Red Riding Hood, you're the next one on my list. You're everything that a demon's born to want. Hey there, little Red Riding Hood, grant you one final wish. Kneel down low and pray to the demon heart.
Hey, Red, what's a little girl like you doing out alone in the woods?
I've got big bad ears to hear you with, and my big bad eyes. I can see you, bitch, and you know what's behind my big bad smile. Well, it's my big bad teeth that gonna eat you with. Hey there, little Red Riding Hood, you're the next one on my list. You're everything that a demon's mom would want. Hey there, little Red Riding Hood, grant you one final wish. So kneel down low and pray to the demon mind. Now the road ran as fast as he could to catch up. Big bad bitch in the red hood. I'm gonna kill your ass and eat your cupcakes too. 'Cause I'm the big bad wolf and it's the end of you. Hey there, little Red Riding Hood, you're the next one on my list. You're everything that a demon's born to want. Hey there, little Red Riding Hood, grant you your final wish. So kneel down low and pray to the demon mind.
Oh yes, and that was Little Red Riding Bitch by Demon Boy. Yes, that is that is the actual name of the title. Richard's just completely, to use a better word, corpsed in the background.
Very apt word if we're talking about horror.
Absolutely. Anyway, if you just joined the madness, you're listening to Eclectic Musings on audioburger.com. Now I've got a bit of the giggles with me, Sasha Cooper. But now, Richard Gladman is our first guest to kick off the whole season 2, and we're going to be talking about his link to musical theatre later, because the linking theme for this season is musical theatre, in case you didn't gather from last week. But we've got him in because, as I said before, he not only is the founder of the Classic Horror Campaign and an expert in horror films, but what's very interesting is that he is a Brighton boy and that he runs an event called Frighten Brighton. So tell us a little bit about how that came about, because we did touch a little bit of it earlier, but more details, please.
Well, Frighten Brighton has been kind of ongoing for the last couple of years. It was originally put together by myself and Sarah James, who's also known as Scare Sarah. And we both had similar thoughts. I mean, we met originally on Twitter, and we both had similar thoughts that we were living in Brighton. Brighton's a very creative, artistic and kind of eclectic city. but it didn't seem to cater very well for horror film fans. And we sort of didn't understand why. Brighton was a perfect place to have horror festivals. So we just thought, oh, come on, let's just do it. We'd already started doing the double bills in London of classic horror films. So we thought, we'll kind of set up a brand, Frighten Brighton, and see what happens here. We started off, we did a couple of shows. We did one show at the Comedia, which was part of the classic horror campaign. That was a double bill of, I think, what was it? House on Haunted Hill, obviously the original with Vincent Price, and Asylum, which is one of the Amicus films from the 70s. That's a British classic. That went down really well. We used the Frighten Brighton umbrella for that. And then thought, well, let's expand this. So we found a venue which was the Rock Inn, which beautiful pub. It's a little bit far out of town. It's in Upper Kent Town, but it was a fantastic place. Screening facilities upstairs, big main, huge space on the ground floor, and a basement. So we decided, well, I thought it'd be a good idea to have what we eventually named the Macabre Market.
Ah, yes.
So it was like a kind of like a craft fair mixed with one of these film fair events, but all with a gothic and a horror and a film theme. So any artists that we had, any designers that we had, were all part of the sort of the darker underbelly of arts and the creative side. And we had people selling books and comic books and other things. So that took place on the ground floor and in the basement. We had ghost story readings, all kinds of stuff, lots of homemade horror cupcakes as well.
Oh, cool. Now,
Yeah.
you're talking my language, sugar, so to speak.
There you go. So, we had all this stuff going on. It was an all-day event, and we had, I think it was 3 films the first time, sort of showing at various times during the day and the evening. Some of the films like 80s films, and we did the 1991 remake of Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, yeah.
We thought that doesn't get much of an airing these days. So we did that. We did another one as well, so many months later, like a follow-up. The event ran really smoothly. The Macabre Market was fantastic. The films were good fun, but the attendance was really low.
Yeah.
And I think it was the venue. I don't know. It was so far out of the way. We didn't have a big sort of advertising budget behind us. So when we decided to do the all-day Frighten Brighton last year, we got a celebrity host to help us out. That was Emily Booth from the Horror Channel, who we talked about. But she was lovely. She came along, was brilliant. She was there all day, introducing the films, chatting to the fans, having photos taken, signing autographs. It was brilliant. And we had that at the Comedia. Downstairs in the basement, and they were fantastic as well, and they were great with the publicity. We had sponsorship from Shock Horror magazine and from Hemlock Books.
Now Hemlock Books is pretty cool, actually.
They are very cool. They are local as well. They're just outside Eastbourne.
That's right.
They sell so many. I mean, they're publishers, but they also renowned on the sort of British horror scene in particular, for selling all of the horror film magazines, the British ones and the American ones, magazines from around the world, and they're brilliant online shop. Hemlock Books. If you love your horror films, go to Hemlock Books. Fantastic. They're also stocking the first new issue in 16 years of what used to be a little horror fanzine called We Belong Dead.
Oh gosh, now that's a classic in itself.
It is. It's got a lot of people have fond memories of it. And it's edited by a gentleman called Eric McNaughton. He's someone who really knows his classic horror inside out. And he's put the magazine together. Hemlock are now stocking it. It's about to go to print. There's an article on the classic horror campaign in there as well by a new up-and-coming writer called Dominic O'Brien, who runs film events as well. So there's a whole load of brilliant people contributing to it. A lot of professional artists and writers. Tony Earnshaw, who wrote the book about the making of Night of the Demon, as well as a million and one other things. He's hosting a horror festival.
Yeah.
He's got an article in there as well. And this is just about to be released. So sort of went off on a tangent, but there's so many great contacts and lots of links to all of these things.
Oh, indeed.
So yeah, so Hemlock Books, they were a co-sponsor of Fright and Brighton.
Well, actually, talking of sponsors and all that kind of thing, Steve Armitage has popped up. He has signed, he's one of the people who has just literally signed, since the broadcast, since you mentioned it, the Classic Horror campaign. Thank you, Steve, for getting involved.
Thank you, Steve, and please spread the word. Get all your family and fiends to sign.
Excellent. And actually, he says here, of course, he's he's actually brought something up. He's got a mate who runs the fetish fair in Islington. Might be a meeting of minds.
Possibly. I'm not going to say any more than that. Depends what your fetish is, I suppose.
Well, that is true. But actually, talking of London, though, you don't just do the Brighton stuff, do you? You've got a big events going on in London, haven't you?
Yeah, I run a monthly film event in London, which is all part of the Classic Horror campaign. So we do a horror double bill every month at the Roxy Bar and Screen at London Bridge. We always show like an old film followed by like a 60s or 70s Hammer or an Amicus, that kind of film, something a bit more gory, the old boobs and blood again. We have a horror quiz, we give away prizes, we have free copies of Shock Horror magazine because they sponsor us, and we have a really great regular crowd that come along and new people coming every month. The latest one is Sunday, March the 24th at 3. It starts at 3 o'clock. The Roxy opens at 1 o'clock, so you can have your lunch there and stuff. The seating is all kind of like cabaret style, so you can actually have your dinner, have a glass of wine or a beer or what have you while you're watching the movies. They have comfy sofas. It's really great atmosphere. It's a beautiful place.
Oh, fabulous.
And the films that we're showing on the 24th is something called Dr. X, which is a 1932 film. It's what's termed as pre-code, so it just means it's before a lot of the censorship came in the 30s. So it's quite more of a grim one. I think it's pre-code anyway. It must be if it's about 1932, about cannibalistic murders in New York, starring Lionel Atwill. And then Theatre of Blood, which is a real British black horror comedy with Vincent Price starring Rig, Arthur Lowe, and many, many British stars. It's a brilliant, brilliant film.
A brilliant cast as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's only £6 for 2 films. Go to the Classic Horror Campaign website, look at the events page. You'll see all the links. You can get your tickets or you can buy them on the door on the day.
Ah, there you go. Now it's quite apt actually. We just had a little bit of activity in the chat room. Mr. Johnny, as in Johnny Burgers, just popped in. Hello. Yeah, he's saying in and out and updating the site, and I'm listening. Johnny Summers is the guy who has who basically owns Audio Burger. So
oh wow.
Yes. Now actually, whilst I'm on the subject of Audio Burger, just a quick diverse thing. We are always looking for presenters to add to our ever-growing site, and we were just talking about this earlier, weren't we? Because people have actually said to you should do your own radio show.
Yeah, it has been mentioned quite a few times that I should do either some kind of radio show or a podcast or what have you. So I keep saying that maybe I should. If I'm asked to, I should do it. People enjoy these things, so maybe that's the next step.
Well, certainly the whole horror genre is going down exceedingly well throughout season 2 in both Night Owl and this one, so you never know, you might just see this one on Audio Burger soon. Now Silk, aka Steve Armitage, can I ask your guest what is his view on the idea of Clive Barker making a film of Weave World?
Okay, I like Weave World. I think it's good. It's more of the fantasy rather than horror, from what I can remember. It's years since I've read the book. But I would worry that if he's got a big budget and it's backed by a Hollywood company, that it will be so blanded out and full of CGI that I don't know if it'd necessarily be for me. I'm not very keen on Hollywood-backed films or the overuse of CGI. It depends. I don't know if he's doing it on a more independent basis, on a slightly lower budget. If it was European backing, British and European, and leave the Americans out of it. No offense to the Americans, who just don't like Hollywood. Then it could work. I mean, look at The Fifth Element.
That's true.
Good, brilliant film. A lot more creativity involved. A lot less homogenized than Hollywood product.
Well, there you go. And certainly us here at Augie Burger do like freedom of speech. And we were talking a little bit about censorship. Do you think the best films that you've come across on your journey have been because of the lack of censorship, or because the censorship has been put into place?
I think it's a difficult one. When I was younger, I hated censorship.
Yeah.
As I've got older, I still don't like censorship as such. But I think there's only so many ways you can push boundaries. One of the things I've always done, even when I was a lot younger and doing stuff for myself, like writing, and I used to write comic strips and all kinds of weird stuff, I would always kind of self-censor. I would kind of tailor stuff to an audience that was maybe a little bit more mainstream. Even with the horror stuff that I do for the classic horror, I tend to try and I want it to be accessible. It's like a lot of the old films that we look at now are suitable for children. The really old films, a lot of the monster films. I mean, in the States, they were all shown on TV in sort of afternoon slots, and it was always aimed at kids, monster kids, as they used to call them back in the 70s. So yeah, I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I think sometimes censorship can actually make people use their imagination more. It's like there's a lot of writers who purposefully kind of add restrictions. When they're writing a book, they don't just say, right, I'm going to write anything I want. A lot of writers I've spoken to have said that they kind of place certain boundaries around what they're going to write. And it helps to kind of focus their thoughts, and it helps them sort of move in a certain direction. So censorship as such I'm against, but I think it's okay to kind of place boundaries, because I think it can increase creativity, not restrict it.
That's actually very appropriate to use as a springboard to the final section, which we'll be going into in a moment. But now we've got to do our final little bit of musical interlude, because in case you didn't gather, season 2 is dedicated to musical theatre as a linking theme. So we're going to come back after this this little musical interlude dedicated to musicals, 2 completely different genres. We're going to kick off with the very aptly titled Phantom of the Opera from the Andrew Lloyd Webber. Richard Gladman's going eek in the background. You can tell he quite yeah, okay, he's got mixed views on that one. We'll get onto that in a moment, because obviously the film version, and then you got the musical theatre version. But we're then going to go on to another track which is completely different, and this is the one we're going to be talking about in more detail, because there's a campaign to bring this particular musical over to the UK, and it's from Evil Dead the Musical, and it's called What the Fuck Was That? But in the meantime, we're going to kick off Richard's corpsing again. We're going to kick off with Sarah Brightman and Antonio Banderas' version of Phantom of the Opera.
that voice which calls to me and speaks my name. And do I dream again? For now I find the phantom of the opera is here inside my mind.
Sing once again with me our strange duet. My power over you grows stronger yet. And though you turn from me to glance behind, the phantom of the opera is there inside your mind.
Those who have seen your face draw back in fear. I am the mask you wear.
It's me they hear, my spirit and my voice in one combined. The phantom of the opera is there inside your mind. Phantom of the opera, beware the phantom of the opera. In all your fantasies, you always knew that man a mystery.
We're both in you.
And in this labyrinth, where night is blind, the phantom of the opera is there inside your mind. See, my angel.
The phantom of the opera.
See my angel fusing. See my angel. Sing to me.
What the fuck was that? Your sister has turned into a zombie. What the fuck was that? Your girlfriend was a demon too. What the fuck was that? She just ripped my pre-ripped Abercrombie. What the fuck was that? I got some Shelly on my shoe. What darkness lurks beyond this wooden sanctum? What the fuck was that? Dude, these hoes been zombified. I cannot stay here anymore. I'm getting out of here. No, we cannot leave. Linda's ankle won't make it, I fear. I cannot stay. I killed my lay. I must go now. You can't go now. I must. You can't. I must. You can't. Bitches out for blood. I can't take this anymore. We don't even know if there's a way back except for
Gotta
that damn
go
broken
right now.
footbridge.
I'll find a road where I'll flag down a van.
Just listen listen to me.
No, I
Linda
won't.
can't walk,
It's time to go.
cannot hike, can't even stand. Then we'll leave her. That's our brand new plan. What the fuck was that? Now I'll put an end to this vacation. What the fuck was that? Scott, don't leave me all alone. Necronomicon, the book of the dead. The chant, the chant's gone. What the fuck was that? It's the Evil Dead.
Oh, yes, and that was... What the fuck was that? Evil Dead the Musical. Yes, that is the actual title. And we've had quite a few people who are going mad for this section. We've got Honey Pie in the chat room, aka the lovely Lewis, who played Summer of '69 earlier, in case people were wondering. Again, you can find his page if you look for... If I can just find it again, you can find the lovely Lewis Corbett on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/Lewis Corbett solo artist, or one word. You can also find the Courtesans on thecourtesans.net. That we also played earlier. We had Demon Boy played. You type him in and he'll come up with his stuff, and of course, you've got wonderful Richie, Dave Porter, and The Secret. Now, if you want to know about this fantastic artist we played earlier, you can go to www.richie, that's RITCHIE, daveporter.co.uk, and you'll be able to find out about these wonderful people. Now, we're going to get on to the whole musical theatre thing with Richard Gladman here, because there is a specific reason why the last track is very special to him. Can you tell us why that is?
Well, it's interesting. The last track was it's called What the Fuck Is That? That's right, isn't it?
What the fuck was that?
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, what the fuck was that? Sound very polite. And it's from Evil Dead the musical. Now, I don't know, a lot of horror fans might not be aware that there's been like a fringe musical playing. I think it started in Canada, as far as I know. And it's a musical version of The Evil Dead, classic horror film, just been remade. Just the remake's just about to come out. But my partner is an MD. He's a musical director.
Yeah, and he's in the chat room as well. Neil, I think his name, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. And even though he's not actually a horror fan as such, but he had shown an interest. He wants to get the rights to Evil Dead the musical so that it can be performed in the UK. It's something that he's mentioned, he's looked into in the past. Had a few knockbacks with that. Wouldn't know all the details. It's probably not my area. But it's interesting that it's come up again through speaking to yourself, Sasha, and various other people, that it seems to be there's still a groundswell of support, because it has gone to the States, it has gone to other places, but it still has not come to the UK, and horror fans here will lap it up.
Why do you think it hasn't come over to the UK?
I just think it's a rights issue. I think maybe the guys who hold the rights could be holding out for something bigger than just Fringe. But I don't know whether the West End would touch it, because I don't know if it's got legs. I think it could be something that would be big for a couple of months, but maybe has more of a niche audience. I don't know if it's something that would run in a big theatre, not like the Rocky Horror Show or something like that. But who knows?
Well, and what makes this musical, do you think, so different compared to others?
I think because the original Evil Dead film was obviously independent, low budget. You know, it's a real grassroots kind of thing, a bunch of people getting together and seeing what they could come up with. And I gather, my knowledge is probably a bit limited on this, but I gather that the original show was kind of thrown together on a budget, low budget. I think there's only like one major set. Obviously, there's a small cast, but
Yeah.
they threw everything at it. They made it fun. The songs are lively, humorous. Obviously, you've got the swearing, you've got the comedy. It's taken the indie sensibilities of the original film and translated it into musical theatre. They also apparently had, I think they had like like the big concerts, they have like a splash zone in some, like Kylie did when she did the
Oh.
Aphrodite worldwide huge concert. She had all fountains and stuff. Well, the Evil Dead musical had a splash zone because there was so much blood thrown at the audience.
Oh my gosh! So it really does take interactive theatre to a high extreme here.
Yes, definitely. Which it's fun. It's a really fun project. And the Evil Dead, there is so much love for the original trilogy. It's unreal. Sam Raimi, the director, and Bruce Campbell, the actor. There's a huge fan base for these guys and for those films. Hence the remake. There's also a sequel. They're actually doing a sequel to the original trilogy.
Yeah.
So there is an Evil Dead 4 coming out
Oh my god!
with Bruce Campbell, apparently. So
With Bruce Campbell. I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be a very interesting take in itself.
even more reason that it's going to be in the major public consciousness. It's probably the right time to bring Evil Dead the musical over here to maximize the potential.
Indeed. Now, this is quite an interesting thing for you because, and I know people such as Pete Ringmaster and Johnny Summers will be interested to hear this, but you are not, or shall I say, you were not a huge musical theatre fan. What made you change?
Yeah, I mean, I was always one of these people that would be musical theatre. Ew, like no way, no. I just wasn't interested. I just wasn't. It's just I didn't think it was my thing. I liked pop music. I liked some underground music, dance music, what have you. Musical theatre, no way. But my partner is a musical director, so it amuses both of us because I do loads of stuff in the horror world. He's not really into horror. His whole world is musical theatre. He's a vocal coach. He's worked with the best West End stars, Broadway stars. So it's a whole different ball game. But obviously, because we've been together for over 5 years.
5
Oh,
years?
yeah.
Wow.
um,
That's just a marriage in itself, really, isn't it?
I guess so. And because of that, we like to show an interest in each other's careers, friends, and what we do. So I just started 5 years ago going to see various productions, not just his, but productions that friends and colleagues of his were involved with, from the big West End musicals like Wicked and Avenue Q and stuff, to the small fringe stuff. And I have to say, it opened my mind. It made me realise that musical theatre wasn't like a one note genre. There was so many different types. I tend to prefer. See, I'm beginning to sort of be more knowledgeable about it, and I tend to prefer the fringe stuff, the
Yeah.
smaller shows. I'm not a huge fan. I went to see Wicked. The performances are lovely. The actors are brilliant, but I just found it a bit lame. It wasn't my cup of tea.
Was it too commercial, do you think?
For me, probably yes. It also seemed very dated, but I don't know. It just wasn't. It was fun, but I didn't really see what all the fuss was about. Whereas when Neil did a version of The Hired Man, which is something I'd never heard of,
Yes.
it's much more low key sort of thing, and he ended up being nominated for an award as best MD for the sort of off West End, so that's like fringe.
Sorry, what's
theatre.
MD for those who don't know?
Oh, sorry, musical director. So he put the show together musically, and it just received huge critical acclaim in the sort of theatre scene, which is fantastic. And it's that kind of thing that ended up moving me. I mean, I thought it would be something really boring because it's about, I don't know, coal miners or something. To me, it really just went over my head. But when I went to see the show, I just thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it moved me more than any of these big sort of mainstream things.
Okay, so I guess it really depends on how everything is put together. I mean, what do you think makes the more fringe style musicals more appealing?
I think for me, it's I think it's the fact that it's a more intimate space. So you've got more of a connection between the audience and the cast. The shows tend to be maybe a bit more experimental. You're going to get more variety in Fringe than you are on the West End. I mean, so much of the West End is, I think the term they use now is jukebox musical
Yeah,
theatre.
jukebox musical theatre,
Yeah,
yes.
so it's just stuff like you've got the Spice Girls, load of songs by popular pop band from the 90s, throw them together, and you've got another sort of Mamma Mia type thing going on. But it's lazy, it's not a new show by a new writer. It's not pushing the envelope. It's a bunch of old pop songs strung together loosely by a apparently not very good storyline and stuck on the West End to try and make a bit of money. That's there's no imagination.
Well, there you go. And of course with Evil Dead, it does tend to well, shall we say it's not quite using the imagination, it is what it is. But what is interesting about this musical, it wasn't until you mentioned it to me that I did some research into it. It really does emphasize the whole thing with Hammer horror movies to many degrees, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe there's sort of like a lot of homage to that kind of film. I mean, at the end of the day, we spoke about Hammer earlier on, and I guess Hammer introduced, as well as the sexual element, Hammer introduced blood and gore
Yeah.
and colour into horror films. And The Evil Dead, yeah, it was about 1981, 82.
1981, yeah, that's about right.
So it was after Hammer had kind of finished and disappeared, but it was the forefront of the new wave of horror from America, I guess, indie horror in the 80s, and all they were doing was taking Hammer and pushing it to the extreme, I guess, in some ways.
That's really cool. And of course, Evil Dead really does push all boundaries, as we've established very, very quickly. Now, you've got a little bit of a campaign again. And now, why does this not surprise me? You've got a little bit of a campaign to bring this over to the UK, haven't you?
Well, let's say there's some argument here about whose campaign this one is. I
That's
think we're
true.
sharing this one.
We are. This is true. No, what happened was I had no idea he had a campaign going on. If you tuned into last week's show, I got so carried away with the whole thing with the Evil Dead musical. I went, right, that's it. We're going to get Audio Burger involved. We're going to support this campaign. We're going to start our own campaign. We're going to bring it over to the UK. And then when I spoke to Richard last night before he came onto the show, he then tells me, "Oh, I've got a campaign actually. Somebody else has got a campaign." Oh, flippin' heck!
Yeah, it's not actually myself, but I was doing some research as well recently because something had cropped up probably on the Facebook timeline or something about Evil Dead the musical in the UK again. And because it's something that Neil had mentioned and he'd been looking at trying to get over here a year or two ago, obviously it was in my consciousness. So I'm sure, and I need to do some more research because it's not my campaign, but I think that there is another campaign that's been started recently. I don't know if it's recently, but that's sort of building momentum in the UK to try and get it over here. So I think myself and Sasha and Audio Burger need to kind of get together on this, do a bit of research, find out if anyone who's listening knows anything about any campaigns to bring Evil Dead the musical to the UK, get in touch with us and we'll follow it up.
Well, indeed, because we certainly need to make this huge. And now, those who have gotten used to me, they'll know that when I get an idea in my head, I get exceedingly excited about it and I become obsessed with it. So, I'm going to reiterate what I said on the last show, and that was, if you want this wonderful musical to come over to the UK, I want you to go to the website. In fact, both Richard and I want you to go to that website, evildeadthemusical.com. Watch the clips, listen to the music, because although we've only got one of the tracks on there, it's still enough to get people interested. And there's a few people have pointed out, oh, profanities on air. We are gonna get kicked ass. Oh no! And this is again the whole thing with the censorship. But then we throw censorship out the window, don't we?
Well, apparently we're allowed to here, so
Oh,
yes.
Oh, yes, indeed we are. So, this is what we'd like you to do, because in the next few days, a Facebook page will be coming up to literally get this campaign started. So, it doesn't matter whether, until that's set up, in the meantime, hit the musical website, evildeadthemusical.com, plague them with emails. Get them to basically say, right, why aren't you over in the UK? This is where I am in the UK, and it doesn't matter where you are, whether it's Brighton, London, Scotland, the Midlands, in fact, anywhere. And in fact, we're not just going to make this the UK. We're going to make it global. So, yeah, Matthew Meadows, I know who's listening out there. If you have any other further contacts in the US of A, or if you have any European contacts, get them to support the campaign. Plague the website, plague them with emails, and in the meantime, and also generally show your support. What do you think, Richard? A bit of a petition to try and get it over here?
Oh yeah, definitely. But again, I would say we need to check first, because I am convinced that there is already at least one petition on the go for this. So I think it's absolutely fair. If they've already got hundreds, if not thousands, of signatures, we should jump on board with them, get them involved, and we can support their campaign.
Indeed. So, campaigner out there, if you are listening, we want to support you as well. So please, 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 please get in touch. So, in the meantime, anything else you want to add about this particular musical?
Just that we want to see it in the UK. You know, it's all well and good there being clips on the internet, and there being different versions around the world, because there are. But what's the use of that if we can't go and see it?
Well, there you go, indeed. And on that note, we're going to wind up. I can't believe it, the time has literally whizzed again. Richard, thank you so much for popping season 2's cherry, so to speak.
Thanks for inviting me, Sasha. It's been fun.
Will you come back on the show and tell us how you're getting on with the campaign, and also any further updates on Evil Dead, etc.?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And there's lots of other projects that are lurking that I've been keeping under my hat for the time being.
Ah, well, in that case, we've definitely got to get you back onto the show when things are a little bit more in place. So, next week, we are going to have a very eccentric gentleman, but in the best possible way, in case he's listening out there. In fact, well, what can I say? He is one of Brighton's most colourful, extreme characters. He is Brighton's answer to Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City. I'm talking, of course, about Peter Jarrett, the Brighton socialite extraordinaire who writes for Absolute Brighton as one of its regular columnists. He's written a book called Brighton Babylon, which is already taking the world by storm, and we have managed to grab an exclusive in-depth interview with him next week, so do not miss this one. In the meantime, we're going to take you into the night with, yes, a musical theatre themed thing, but it's still something I love. This is The Last Night of the World from Miss Saigon, which is a very underplayed musical in itself. So, we're going to leave you with that, and make sure you tune in next week for the Peter Jarrett interview. Promise you, it's going to be a fucking good one. In the meantime, you've been listening to Sasha Cooper and Richard Gladman on audioburger.com. See you next week. Bye.
What a party that was.
You're going to leave me now.
Yes, I'm going to leave and take you out with me. In a place that won't let us feel, in a life where nothing seems real, I have found you. I have found you.
that's moving too fast. In a world where nothing can last, I will hold you. I will hold you.
Our lives will change when tomorrow comes.
Tonight our hearts drown the distant drums.
And we have music, alright, tearing the night. A song played on a solo saxophone. A crazy sound,
A lonely sound, a cry that tells us love goes on and on. Played on a solo saxophone. It's telling me to hold you tight and dance like it's the last night of the world.
on the other side of the earth. There's a place where life still has worth. I will take you.
I'll go with you.
You won't believe all the things you see. I know 'cause you see them all with me. If we're together, that's when we'll hear it again. A song played on a solo saxophone. A crazy sound, a lonely sound, a cry that tells us love goes on and on. Played on a solo saxophone. It's telling me to hold you tight and dance like it's the last night of the world. Dreams were all I ever knew. Dreams you won't need when I'm through. Anywhere we may be, I will sing with you a song. Played on a solo saxophone. So stay